I gotta say, I hate this picture. I really dislike it when the media does this. I don't care if it's a left-wing publication or a right-wing publication. I don't like this tactic. It's an editorial tactic. Like, surely there are better pictures of this politician. But they choose this particular one in order to stir your emotions. Like, oh, look at the evil man. Look at what he is doing. And you don't need to show me this picture to realize that what he is saying is not good. So I really dislike this tactic. And you usually see the left-wing press doing it towards right-wing politicians. And again, it's not like they can't find normal pictures where they look presentable. But they go out of their way in order to find the most ridiculous picture. So, a top German official, a man by the name of Herr Herbert Reul from the CDU, Angela Merkel's party. He is the interior minister of the German state of North Rhine-Westphalia. He is saying that the people who are protesting against energy blackouts are enemy of the state and extremists. So the people who are upset about the rising cost of living and are blaming the politicians for those rising costs of living, they're enemies of the state. In other words, what he is saying is that he wants any reason. Just give him one reason so that he can start advocating for social media to ban people, to have activists find out who these people are and get them fired and ostracized from social life. He just wants one reason, just any reason. And usually the most preferred reason is guilt by association. You have a legitimate protest where the people there are legally assembled, but 5 of them happen to do something naughty. They happen to do something illegal, whatever that is. And then all of the protest needs to be shut down. How convenient is that? And notice how it's only the protests that are against the establishment. The protests that are for the establishment, those don't get the same treatment. Like, for example, an environmentalist protest. Like, what is an environmentalist protest? It demands that the government takes a stronger step in. That they put more taxes, they limit freedoms, they restrict more, they get more involved into the citizens' life, right, to protect the planet. Well, those protests, they're allowed to continue. If someone does something illegal, they're arrested. The media doesn't focus on that incident. But then if you have other types of protests, like for example this one, where the politicians completely fuck up the economy and people notice that their cost of living is going up. Like for example, I don't know, the politicians decide to shut down the economy for the Lulzi to keep people safe. And then the consequences, the bill for doing that finally arrives. Or if the politicians decide, hey, let's import gas from Russia en masse, and then they realize, oh, well, we actually need to put sanctions on Russia because, well, they're invading Europe right now. I think we need to punish the protesters. Right? So that's how it works. It's like when the people are demanding accountability from the governed, all of a sudden the protests get to be shut down. When the people demand the government do more, all of a sudden those protests are encouraged. So the interior of German state is saying that the anti-mandatory vaccines and anti-lockdown demonstrators have found a new cause, the energy crisis. So what he is doing is that they are painting the people who are against the rising of the cost of living, they're making them sound irrational, conspiracy theorists, right? Like just crazy people. He's calling his own citizens crazy. This is what he's saying. And all of these are crazy people on the streets, okay? And they're dangerous. So we need to do something about it. Like this is the speech, that the underlying tones. In an interview with the German news outlet, he reveals that German security services were keeping an eye on the extremists, right? Like if you're protesting against the rising cost of living in Germany, you're an extremist. And they plan to infiltrate these protests and stage violence, with the unrest being planned via Telegram messenger app, which German authorities have previously tried to ban. Notice when Antifa is doing violence, all of a sudden they're not aware of it. They probably don't even know what Antifa is. What can you do? I think like it was in the United States as well. There were protests against Facebook censorship, and they were led by a black individual, and the black individual got beaten up by Antifa. Like, what does that have to do with fascism? What, you know, like people are protesting against a private company. It's because they're protesting actually against the established chain of power. And that private company is very important in directing discourse in an age where everyone was locked in their homes. So apparently, despite the real threat of potential blackouts, this is what I love, right? The real threat of potential blackouts is being called by the World Economic Forum. It's like, oh, the pandemic was nothing compared to a cyber attack. A cyber attack, and I'm going to paralyze the infrastructure. And okay, like, is the solution to start refusing technology and go back and work on paper like Romania has? Like, a Romania hospital was hacked, and they were asking for ransom in order to unlock the server, and the Romanian doctors told the hackers to fuck off, and they just pulled papers from their archive, and they start working the old-fashioned way with paper documents. Of course, that's not the solution for the cyber attack. The solution for the cyber attack is the same solution for the pandemic, is the same solution for the racism, is the same solution for fighting the Nazi. More government power. Okay, like, that is the only solution that you're ever going to hear from these people. More government power. Nothing else, okay? No nuclear energy, no going back to paper, refusing technology, having backup stories, and all of that. No. And by the way, you're going to notice something very interesting in Germany. When you have a protest against the government, there was, for example, a women's protest. I forgot the name of it. I think it was like 100-something decibels, where women were shocked by the large amount of brutal murders and rapes that were happening in the street. And again, they went out in order to demand accountability from the government. And all of a sudden, Antifa shows up, beats up the protesters, many of whom were women, and the police on Facebook thanks Antifa. Right? So what does this mean? It means that the government looks good on the cameras because they're not sending the police to crack down on the protesters. They're not doing anything. It's just that it so happens that the good citizens, members of they happen to show up and they make sure that the protesters go away. I think in the United States we witnessed a similar tactic when people went and protested against Facebook. I forgot exactly why, but I know there was a black individual who was one of the leaders of those protests, and he got beaten up by Antifa. You know, and again, it looks good on camera. I mean, the cops didn't do anything. The feds didn't do anything. It just so happens that the good guys, you know, the arrived on the scene, and they fought fascism. And in this case, fascism means protesting against a private company. That's what, you know, like, very interesting, isn't it? So why do they defend the private company? Well, because in the age where everyone was locked in their home, communication was directed by that private company. They got to decide what you are allowed to say and what you're not allowed to say online. So what's interesting here, and this is like the most fascinating thing, is that despite the very real threat of potential blackouts and gas shortages, Royal claims that such issues were feeding conspiracy theory narratives. Motherfucker, it's in the newspapers. Like, the newspapers are talking about gas shortages. Like, the newspapers are saying, oh, Germany might freeze this winter. We need solidarity in Europe. Greece, lend us your aid. Poland, please. Hungary, increase the gas. Like, this is every single day in every single newspaper. And then you have the World Economic Forum with Klaus Schwab going like, oh, the pandemic was nothing. Wait for the cyber attack. If a cyber attack manages to hit in our modern age, it would cause massive calamity. And what is the solution for the cyber attack? Is it, let's go back working on paper? No! It's the same solution as it's for the environment problem. It's the same solution like you had for the pandemic. It's the same solution that you had for the racismus. More government control. That's the solution. More government control, more taxes, more direct intervention into people's lives, more censorship. Fun fact, you know, there was a hospital in Romania which got hacked, and the hackers demanded ransom. So the doctors at the hospital said, no, please fuck off, we got discovered. They went into the archives, they pulled the actual files on paper, and they started to work with those, because they didn't need computers. Because in Romania, at least in hospitals and in other public places, while you do use computers, everything on a computer, every single bit of data is also wrote on a piece of paper, which the hospital has to keep for 10 years. So, in the event when the hospital does get hacked, the hackers can get fucked. Because they don't really do anything besides, okay, slow down the work at the hospital and Obviously, it's not a good thing, but it's a lot better than not having anything to work with. So, of course, he's saying that everything is a right-wing conspiracy. And even though this is actually being published in the press, at least in my press, I don't know if in the German press, like maybe in the German press they don't talk about the fact that there may not be gas this winter or that there might be blackouts. But apparently, oh no, never mind. The Germans across the country have been panic buying stoves, firewood, and electric heaters, and the government tells them that the thermostat will be limited at 19 degrees Celsius in public buildings, and that sports arenas and exhibition halls will be used as warm-up spaces this winter to help freezing citizens who are unable to afford the skyrocket energy bills. We're talking about the first world nation in Europe, okay? And this was fucking self-inflicted. This was self-inflicted. They wanted to rely on Russian gas. They were the ones leading the zero carbon policy, the zero emission policy, which is having these economic repercussions. And instead of being proud of it, it's like, well, yes, but your suffering is helping Mother Gaia. No, they're like, oh, conspiracy theories, enemies of the state. Enemies of the state. This is something that fascist countries call its people, its citizens, right? Apparently, Remix News blaming right-wing conspiracy theories for a crisis caused by the German sanctions on Russia and its dependence on the green energy is pretty rich. Royal, like the country's federal interior minister, Nancy Faeser, is attempting to tie right-wing ideology and protests against the COVID-19 policies to any potential protest in the winter. What the fuck does right-wingers have to do with protesting against the increased standard of living? Like, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of apolitical people out there that never voted in their life, and it's like, oh, well, I can't put food on the table. What the fuck is going on? While some on the right, such as AFD, have stressed that the government sanctions against Russia are the primary factor for the crisis, they have not advocated an overthrow of the government. Instead, they have stressed that they need to restart the Nord Stream 2 pipeline and end energy sanctions against Russia. Well, the problem is you shouldn't be here in the fucking first place. You shut down your own nuclear power. You are the ones that have pushed for European Union environmentalist policies. And by the way, the ones that created the environmentalist policies in Europe is Russia. Like Russia did that during the Cold War. The KGB has unsealed the archives. We know that they're the ones that have done this in order to cause the European nations to cripple themselves energetically. It's ridiculous, right? And now you want to be reliant on Russia again. No, like, how about you open your nuclear power, you give up this crazy zero emission policy stuff, and, because otherwise, like, why are you even in NATO? Why are you even in NATO? Like, if you're like, oh, well, no, like, Russia, not so bad. Let's still take gas from them. And at this point, you become a vassal state. Like, Russia can literally do anything to Germany if they keep being reliant on it. You need to learn how to walk. I'm sorry, it's difficult, I know. Like, if you have been constantly being spoon-fed by someone and then you have to eat by yourself, it's a difficult process, I understand. But you need to learn how to fucking do it. Let me know what you guys think, though, and I'll see you in the comment section. Take care.